Before we start, we'll take about a minute just to really arrive in the room and really connect with what is it that we're interested in and what's moving us about this whole issue of Copenhagen and what's next. Let's take a moment to just sit with yourself. You may want to close your eyes.
If I could swallow.
How does it feel for you that this key international event did not manage to come to a treaty that will protect our future generations?
Cause in a world full of wonder, don't let it all pull you under when it's still.
Come over here, take a pen, and just write up something that puts your voice into the conversation.
All I wanna do, show you easy.
The Bella Centre could have been a figment of people's imagination as far as I was concerned, in terms of how detached it was, both physically and emotionally from the messy maelstrom that was happening in the Klimaforum. Thousands and thousands of people.
The People's Conference in the centre, this very kind of chaotic, kind of interesting, exciting, all sorts of ideas floating around, and a lot of creativity and passion about protecting us from climate change. And then out there in the Bella Centre, it feels like either it was a figment of your imagination or this kind of dead space having something completely different happening. As the build-up to the demonstration on Saturday happened, feeling kind of under attack, and just feeling like
under attack by
the police, who were got increasingly aggressive.
They say there's no roads where we're going.
And if we won, what would that look like?
Well, I struggle with it because it would look like something like transition. And I just, the world isn't ready to do what we're doing. Some small pockets of it are, but not the world as a whole, and certainly not corporations and governments.
Another thing that really just hit me viscerally, kind of, right in the gut, was standing opposite. There were men from Africa, and that was almost too hard to take. When having them say, well, what's happening now with climate is you stole our gold, you stole our oil for Nigeria, you stole valuable minerals like coltan for mobile phones, and in its wake leaving pollution, devastation, communities sort of smashed. He recounted this litany of theft and devastation. He said, now you've kind of taken the last thing we've got, which is a livable climate, because what's being talked about, the 2 degrees that people are talking about, if it's globally 2 degrees rise that we find acceptable, that's probably going to be 3 degrees for Africa, because that rise isn't evenly split around the world. And 3 degrees for Africa, it sort of presents that continent as pretty much unlivable. I cannot understand how people can not lead and not make, if that's the right word, not make decisions and not use every ounce of their power to do something about, and how they can sleep at night, how they're unable to connect their roles and responsibilities in a wider humanity sense.
Is that it's not just the system of industrial production. There's also an internal system that's going on at the same time that is keeping us in the sort of place that we're doing the sort of things that you're talking about. Where I've got the person is that what's going to save us from dangerous climate change is the kind of multiple system collapses that are now starting to occur, and then I think are going to start to accelerate.
I mean, you've probably seen the graphs of CO2 emissions, and the only time they've gone down is since we've been hitting this worldwide recession.
Yeah.
So from a climate perspective, worldwide recession is the best thing that we've had. In the Bella Centre, it was 96% men.
They were delegated to represent their country's interests, you know, what they were sent to do. So I think if you open them up to their compassion, they still are there supposed to be representing what they've been tasked with doing. And I think actually it's not that they're damaged people, except that they're working in an environment where you would have to become fairly brutalised to survive. I mean, imagine, you know, like, would you like to be an MP? Would you like to be Prime Minister? It's a nightmare job. You know, sensible, sane, compassionate people can't do jobs like that because of the system. And I don't think that we're going to get change until we change the system. Even though Gordon Brown was tasked with going to say, oh yes, we're going to reduce our emissions, that's not a system that I trust. That's not a system that I could actually see work. And I wasn't expecting there to be a good deal, and I was happier that there was no deal than that there was what I most feared was that there would be a stitch-up.
When it's cold outside.
You know, 5 years ago, you know, if you'd said carbon footprint, most people wouldn't have known what you're talking about. You know, the how far we've come in 5 years. You know, if you say peak oil, or at least if you say the oil is going to run out, people say, yes, well, let's hope it's not yet now, whereas 5 years ago they would have said, no, it's not. So there is a big change. And something else that struck me about COP15 was the television coverage, which was amazing. There was this sense that the whole world was watching.
Where we need to go is pre-industrial. We need to get to pre-industrial CO2 concentration.
Partly it's about convincing people that there's some point in taking action.
Some of the most powerful movements in this country have been from people who individually have very small amounts of power, but collectively, because of the way they work and they organise in unions and social movements, they can exercise a great deal.
I guess I see that the transition is about building the alternatives, and you know, and not just transition. Lots of others, partners there are doing that, and I see it as putting in place the pieces that we're going to need as the system breaks down, and the only way I see the system changing is by putting other ways of living in place.
Why wasn't Klimaforum in the news? Yeah, why, when I was watching Newsnight, and you know, they had 45 minutes almost every night talking about climate camp, there was no voice there. As you go through some darker moments, and you go through some optimistic moments, I think we all coast between those. You know, I think it's something you can always identify, people involved in transition. You sense that everyone shares that dark consciousness of the reality, of the gravity of what we're in the situation, but also a real bright hope and optimism, because we actually really can see the possibilities of what can be, and you know, they're not contradictory energies, they're both very, very powerful motivating forces. But with those discussions we should be having, quite honestly, in transition, and it's at the right places, is yes, we're going for the ideal, but we also need to be prepared.
I won't be unhappy if economic collapse means Monsanto goes under, Samsung goes under, and I would see in the midst of that economic collapse a renaissance of other type of economics along much more local lines.
All I wanna do.
And I know you've read this book, but there's a book called Collapse by Jared Diamond, which he looks at societies that have collapsed, including the Maya. And he makes the point that within those societies that have collapsed, there was always an elite that was saying, no, we don't need to change. This society serves our needs, so we're going to carry on and keep it like this for as long as possible because it serves our needs.
Show you
Anything we're in now is, in fact, it's an embryonic new system of governance. You know, the transition movement is not just assuming that somehow we'll all agree to a great cause. You know, It's actually saying, you know, we need to invent completely new ways of you know, widespread reaching of understanding and of agreement and of decisions.
All I wanna do, all I really wanna do.
Transition is a compassionate shock doctrine designed to usurp existing power structures as they hit the stresses they are incapable of imagining.